The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Their silver-skinned bodies stood 9 feet tall, towering over every other species they had ever met. Their minds could think faster than any computer, solving problems in seconds that would take other beings years to understand. They had 4 eyes that could see in complete darkness and skin harder than most metals. They called themselves but every other species in the galaxy simply called them the Supreme. No army had ever beaten them. No fleet had ever destroyed their ships. They had conquered 47 different species and made them all bow down. Some of these species had been powerful once. Some had built great civilizations that lasted thousands of years. But when they came, they all fell. It was not even a question anymore. When the fleet appeared in your sky, you surrendered or you died. There was no third choice. High Commander was the most powerful alive. He had led armies across 100 worlds and never lost a single battle. He stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, reading reports from his scouts. The ship was massive, almost 2 miles long, with weapons that could crack a planet in half. Around him, hundreds of officers worked at their stations, monitoring the empire that stretched across 200 star systems. A new report caught his attention. His scouts had found a new species in a small star system near the edge of explored space. The system had a yellow sun and 8 planets. The third planet from the sun was covered in blue water and green land. The beings who lived there called themselves humans. Studied the report carefully. The humans were strange creatures. They were small, barely 6 feet tall at their largest. They had soft skin that could be cut with a simple blade. They had only 2 eyes and could not see in the dark without help. They lived very short lives, rarely more than 100 years. Their technology was primitive. They had only recently discovered how to travel faster than light, stumbling into the wider galaxy like children taking their first steps. The military assessment was clear. The humans posed no threat whatsoever. Their weapons were simple projectiles and basic nuclear devices. Their ships were slow and poorly armored. Their population was limited to a single planet. They would be one of the easiest conquests in history. Fleet Admiral approached and bowed deeply. Was a veteran of dozens of campaigns, a skilled commander who had never known defeat. His silver skin was marked with the ceremonial scars that showed his rank and achievements. High Commander said, "I have reviewed the scout reports on the new species. They call their world Earth, a strange name for a strange people." "What is your assessment?" asked, though he already knew the answer. "They are weak," replied without hesitation. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their military forces are divided among hundreds of separate nations that often fight each other. They have no unified government, no central command structure. They will fall quickly." Nodded slowly. This was exactly what he had expected. Another easy conquest, another species to add to the empire. The humans would provide workers for factories and soldiers for armies. Their planet had valuable resources that would feed the endless hunger of imperial industry. "Send the standard subjugation fleet," ordered. 12 warships should be more than enough, perhaps even too many. Bowed again. "It shall be done, High Commander. The humans will learn their place in the natural order. They will kneel before might as all species must." "Make it quick," added. "I want this finished within 1 planetary rotation. We have more important matters to attend to." Left to carry out his orders and return to his other duties. The human conquest was such a minor matter that he barely thought about it again. In a galaxy full of challenges, these primitive creatures were barely worth noticing. They would surrender as all species did. They would bow as all species must. And the empire would grow slightly larger, slightly stronger, slightly more supreme. On the planet called Earth, the humans had no idea what was coming. They went about their daily lives, working and playing and loving and fighting among themselves. They looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone in the universe. They had been sending signals into space for over a century, hoping to find other intelligent life. They were about to get their answer. Commander led the subjugation fleet toward the human. He was young for a commander, only 300 years old, but he had proven himself in a dozen minor campaigns. This mission was supposed to be simple, a training exercise more than a real battle. His 12 warships carried enough firepower to destroy every major city on the planet below. As the fleet approached Earth, composed the standard subjugation message. Every species received the same words, translated into their primitive languages. It was a script that had been used for thousands of years, a declaration that had brought entire civilizations to their knees. Inhabitants of this world, the message began, you are now subjects of the Empire. Resistance is futile and will result in your destruction. You have one planetary rotation to surrender your governments and military forces. All weapons must be handed over. All leaders must present themselves for processing. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of your largest population centers. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is the will of the Supreme, and it will be obeyed. Broadcast the message on every frequency the humans used for communication. He made sure it reached every government, every military base, every news station on the planet. He wanted them to understand that there was no hope, no chance of survival except through complete surrender. Then he waited for their response. In a small room deep beneath a mountain in North America, the leaders of the major human nations gathered to discuss the alien message. They had dreamed of first contact for generations, imagining friendly visitors who would share knowledge and technology. Instead, they had received a death threat from a species that viewed them as nothing more than insects to be crushed. Some wanted to surrender. The aliens were clearly more powerful, and fighting would only lead to death. Others wanted to fight, knowing that surrender would mean the end of everything humans had built. The debate went back and forth, voices rising in anger and fear. Finally, an old general stood up. His name was, and he had spent his entire life preparing for wars that he hoped would never come. He looked around the room at the frightened faces of his fellow leaders. They want us to kneel, he said quietly. They want us to give up everything we are, everything we have built, everything our ancestors died to create. They think we are weak because we are small. They think we will surrender because we are afraid. He paused, letting his words sink in. They are wrong. Humans do not kneel. We never have and we never will. If they want our world, they will have to take it from our cold, dead hands. And I promise you, we will make them pay for every inch in blood. The room was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the leaders began to nod. The humans would not surrender, they would fight. And they had no idea what they had just started. The 12 warships hung in space near Earth's moon like wolves watching a wounded deer. Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the planet below with growing impatience. The humans had not responded to his message. 20 hours had passed since his broadcast, and the silence was beginning to annoy him. Perhaps they did not understand the message, suggested his second officer. Their translation technology may be too primitive. Shook his head. They understood. They are simply too stupid to accept the truth of their situation. No matter, when I destroy one of their cities, they will learn. He was about to give the order when something strange appeared on his sensors. Hundreds of small signals were rising from the planet's surface and from stations orbiting the world. At first, thought they might be communication satellites or civilian transports. Then his tactical officer identified them. Commander, they are warships, human warships, over 200 of them. Stared at the display in disbelief. These creatures were actually going to fight. Did they not understand how outmatched they were? His 12 ships could destroy their entire fleet without breaking a sweat. This was not courage. This was suicide. They must be desperate, he said finally, or insane. No matter, target their lead vessels and fire, show them the price of defiance. The ships opened fire. Beams of superheated plasma shot across the void. each one carrying enough energy to melt through solid steel. 3 human ships exploded instantly, their crews dying before they even knew what had hit them. But the humans did not retreat. They did not slow down. They did not try to surrender. They accelerated. They flew straight at the fleet, their weapons blazing. Commander Samuel Price sat in the captain's chair of the destroyer Relentless, watching the battle unfold on his tactical display. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, even though none of them had ever believed it would actually come. "Sir, we have lost the Kennedy and the Washington," reported his tactical officer. "The Lincoln is badly damaged and falling back." Price nodded grimly. They were taking heavy losses, just as he had expected. The alien ships were more powerful than anything humans had ever faced. Their weapons were devastating. Their shields seemed impervious to conventional attacks. By any reasonable calculation, this battle was already lost. But Samuel Price had never been a reasonable man. "Lieutenant Martinez," he said to his weapons officer, "what did our scientists learn from scanning their ships?" Martinez pulled up the data on her screen. She was young, barely 25, but she had a gift for seeing patterns that others missed. "Their shields are powerful, sir, but they operate on a specific frequency. If we can disrupt that frequency, even briefly, the shields will fail." "Can we do that with our current weapons?" "No, sir. Our weapons are not designed to affect energy shields. But," she paused, thinking, "if we could hit their shield generators directly with a physical projectile moving fast enough, the impact might disrupt the frequency long enough to create an opening." Price leaned forward. "Show me where their shield generators are located." Martinez highlighted several points on the enemy ship's schematic. The generators were small, barely visible, tucked away in protected alcoves along the hull. Hitting them with a conventional attack would be nearly impossible. "Sir, there is debris floating near their lead ship," said Lieutenant Park, the navigation officer. "Wreckage from the Kennedy. If we could redirect that debris into their shield generators." Price understood immediately. "Martinez, can you calculate a firing solution that would use our to push debris into their weak points?" Martinez's fingers flew across her console. "Yes, sir. It will take precision shooting, but I can do it." "Then do it." The Relentless fired, not at the warship but at a chunk of twisted metal floating nearby. The round struck the debris at incredible velocity, sending it spinning toward the alien vessel. It hit the shield generator at exactly the right angle, at exactly the right speed. The ship's shield flickered and died. Price grabbed the fleet communication channel. "All ships, this is Commander Price. Concentrate fire on their shield generators. Forget their hulls, forget their weapons. Blind them first. Use debris, use asteroids, use anything you can find. Make every shot count." The message spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Ship after ship adjusted their tactics, focusing their fire on the small, vulnerable points that Martinez had identified. More shields began to fail. More ships became vulnerable. Commander could not understand what was happening. His ships were supposed to be invincible. Their shields had never failed in 3,000 years of warfare. But now, one by one, his vessels were losing their protection. And without shields, ships were no more durable than human ones. "Retreat," he screamed. "All ships retreat." But it was too late. The humans had tasted blood, and they were not about to let their prey escape. The battle lasted 9 hours. It was brutal and bloody and horrific. The humans lost 63 ships and over 4,000 lives. Parents lost children. Children lost parents. Wives lost husbands. Husbands lost wives. The cost was terrible beyond measure. But when the guns finally fell silent, all 12 warships were destroyed. Not one alien survived. Not one escaped to tell the tale. In a command bunker on Earth, General received the news. He sat in silence for a long moment, processing what he had just heard. Then he looked at the officers around him. "We won?" he asked, as if he could not quite believe it. "Yes, sir," confirmed the communications officer. "The alien fleet has been completely destroyed. Commander Price reports that he is beginning rescue operations for survivors." Felt tears forming in his eyes. They had done it. Against all odds, against an enemy that should have crushed them like bugs, they had won. They had learned that humans would not kneel. But he knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, the alien empire would learn what had happened. They would send more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. The war had only just started. "Get me Commander Price," ordered. "We need to prepare. This was just the first round." Far across the galaxy, High Commander received the report from his scouts. At first, he refused to believe it. 12 warships destroyed by a primitive species. Impossible. There had to be some mistake, some malfunction in the communication system. But the reports kept coming, each one confirming the impossible truth. The humans had not surrendered. They had fought, and somehow, impossibly, they had won. Stood alone in his chamber, staring at the data on his screen. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never felt before. It took him several moments to recognize the emotion. It was fear. These humans were not like any species that had ever faced. They were weak and fragile and short-lived, yes, but they had done something no other species had ever done. They had adapted. They had learned. They had found weaknesses that they did not even know existed. And they had won. Made a decision. He would not underestimate these creatures again. He would send a fleet so massive that no amount of human tricks could defeat it. He would crush them so completely that no one in the galaxy would ever dare to resist rule again. "Summon Fleet Admiral," he ordered his aide. "Tell him to prepare the Grand Fleet, 300 warships. We are going to teach these humans a lesson they will never forget." The aide bowed and hurried away, turned back to his screen, studying the images of the human. "Enjoy your victory while you can, little creatures," he whispered. "It will be your last." But even as he spoke the words, a small voice in the back of his mind wondered if he was making a terrible mistake. 3 months passed since the first battle. On Earth, the humans worked without rest. They knew what was coming. The alien empire would not accept defeat. They would return with more ships, more weapons, more soldiers, and next time the humans would need to be ready. Scientists studied the wreckage of the destroyed ships day and night. They took apart every piece of alien technology they could find. They learned how the shields worked, how the weapons fired, how the engines moved faster than light. They were like students cramming for the most important test of their lives, except failing this test meant the death of everyone they loved. Admiral Grace Palmer stood in the command center of the newly built defense station orbiting Earth. She was 53 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much death. She had fought in 3 wars between human nations, conflicts that now seemed small and pointless compared to what they faced. "Status report," she said to her staff. Commander Nicholas, her second in command, stepped forward. He was younger than her, barely 40, but the stress of the past months had added years to his face. "We have 140 combat-ready vessels, Admiral. The orbital defense platforms are online, and the special project is ready for deployment." Palmer nodded slowly. The special project was their secret weapon, something the scientists had developed based on their study of technology. They had discovered that the alien shields operated on a specific energy frequency. If they could disrupt that frequency with a powerful enough pulse, the shields would fail. The problem was delivering that pulse. It had to be deployed at point-blank range, inside the shield itself. No human ship could get that close without being destroyed. So they had built something new. Small, unmanned vessels packed with electromagnetic pulse generators and nuclear warheads. They were fast enough to slip through gaps in enemy formations, smart enough to find their targets without human guidance. The scientists called them Hornets. "How many Hornets do we have?" Palmer asked. 12,000, replied. "Hidden throughout the solar system. The aliens will never see them coming." Palmer allowed herself a small smile. It was not much of a smile. There was nothing to celebrate, not yet. But for the first time since the war began, she felt something like hope. Then the alarm started screaming. "Contact!" shouted the sensor officer. "Multiple hyperspace signatures on the edge of the system. They are coming out of faster than light travel now." The main screen lit up with hundreds of red dots. Palmer felt her stomach drop. She had expected the aliens to return with a large fleet. She had not expected this. "Count them," she ordered, her voice steady despite her fear. 300 warships, Admiral, plus support vessels. This is the largest fleet we have ever detected." 300, more than twice what they had faced before. And this time the aliens would not be caught off guard. They would be ready for human tricks. Fleet Admiral stood on the bridge of his new flagship, looking at the human with cold satisfaction. This time, there would be no mistakes. This time, the primitives would learn the true meaning of power. "All ships," he commanded, "advance to attack position. Destroy anything that moves. Leave nothing alive." The fleet surged forward, weapons charging, shields at full power. They were the greatest military force ever assembled. 300 engines of destruction ready to crush a world. Admiral Palmer watched them come. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. She had one chance to get this right, one chance to save her world. "All ships hold position," she ordered. "Do not engage until I give the signal." Her captains were nervous. They could see the enemy fleet approaching, could see the overwhelming force bearing down on them. Every instinct screamed at them to fight, to do something. But they trusted their admiral. They waited. The fleet entered weapons range. Plasma beams began to fire, streaking across the void toward the human ships. The first wave of destruction was about to begin. "Now," Palmer said calmly, "release the Hornets." 12,000 small vessels launched simultaneously from hidden positions throughout the solar system. They were too small for sensors to track easily, too fast for point defense weapons designed to stop larger threats. They flew through the gaps in the enemy formation like insects through a fence. Saw them coming, but he did not understand what they were. "What are those things?" he demanded. "Some kind of missile." Before anyone could answer, the Hornets reached their targets. They detonated in a massive wave of electromagnetic energy, their pulses washing over the fleet like an invisible storm. 230 ships lost their shields at the same moment. Palmer did not hesitate. "All ships attack, target their unshielded vessels, make every shot count." The human fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. Rounds and nuclear missiles tore through hulls that had never been exposed to direct fire. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before now burned in the cold void of space. Could not believe what was happening. His fleet was dying around him. Ships that had conquered entire worlds were being destroyed by creatures he had considered primitive. This was not possible. This was not happening. But it was. They fought back with everything they had. Their weapons were still powerful, their crews still skilled. Human ships died by the dozen, their crews sacrificing themselves to protect their. The battle became a brutal close-quarters brawl, ships fighting at point-blank range in a storm of fire and death. Fleet Admiral died when the Liberty's main battery struck his flagship's reactor core. The massive vessel exploded in a ball of nuclear fire, taking its entire crew with it. Never even had time to understand how completely he had been defeated. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was finally over, the human fleet had lost nearly half its ships. Tens of thousands of soldiers were dead. The cost was almost too horrible to count. But of the 300 warships, only 41 escaped. The rest were destroyed, their crews dead, their threat ended forever. Admiral Palmer stood on the bridge of her damaged flagship, looking at the aftermath of the battle. Wreckage filled the space around Earth, the remains of the greatest fleet that had ever assembled. She felt no joy. There was too much death for that, but she felt something else. Pride. Her people had faced the worst the galaxy could throw at them, and they had survived. On the High Commander received the news in silence. 41 survivors from 300 ships. It was a disaster beyond anything in history. The greatest military power in the galaxy had been humbled by creatures they had considered insects. How? Demanded Supreme. How can this be possible? They are primitives, they should have been crushed. Had been asking himself the same question. He had studied the battle recordings obsessively, watching the human tactics over and over again. And slowly, terrifyingly, he had begun to understand. They are not primitives, he said quietly. They are something we have never faced before. They learn faster than any species we have ever encountered. They saw our shields and invented a way to defeat them in 3 months. They analyzed our formations and found weaknesses we never knew existed. They are not stronger than us. They are more adaptable, and that may be far more dangerous. He pulled up an image of a human on his screen. Such a fragile creature, so small and soft and weak. We have made a terrible mistake, said. We awakened something that should have been left alone, and now I fear that nothing in the galaxy will ever be the same. The war was no longer a simple conquest. It had become a fight for survival, and for the first time in 3,000 years, they did not know if they could win. The war lasted 7 years. 7 long, bloody, terrible years that changed everything. The empire was vast. It stretched across 200 star systems, with trillions of subjects and resources that seemed endless. Their factories could build warships faster than humans could count them. Their armies numbered in the billions. By every logical calculation, they should have won through sheer numbers alone. But humans did not fight logical wars. Admiral Palmer understood something important after the Second Great Battle. Humanity could not win by defending Earth. They would keep sending fleets, keep attacking, keep wearing them down until nothing was left. The only way to survive was to take the fight to the enemy. Human ships began appearing throughout space. Not large fleets that could be tracked and destroyed, but small groups of fast ships that struck without warning and vanished before the enemy could respond. They attacked supply convoys carrying food and fuel to fleets. They sabotaged space stations that built weapons and ships. They spread chaos and fear throughout an empire that had never known either. Captain Daniel led one of these strike teams. His ship was called the Shadow, a modified corvette with a crew of 12. They had been operating behind enemy lines for 18 months, living on stolen supplies and sleeping in shifts. They had destroyed more enemy resources than any other human unit. Tonight, their target was a fuel depot in a system called. It supplied a large portion of the Third Fleet, one of the last major fighting forces the Empire had left. Destroying it would cripple enemy operations for months. Lieutenant Amy Shaw, his second-in-command, checked the sensor data. Minimal security, Captain. 2 patrol ships on standard rotation. The depot itself is automated. No civilians. Nodded with relief. He had no desire to kill innocent people. This was a war against an empire, not against a species. He had seen what happened when soldiers forgot that difference. Take us in, he ordered. Standard approach, quick and quiet. The Shadow slipped through the system like a ghost, using the magnetic field of a nearby gas giant to hide from enemy sensors. The patrol ships never saw them coming. 2 precise shots from their upgraded weapons disabled both vessels without destroying them. The crews would survive, which was how preferred it. The fuel depot was even easier. They planted charges on the main storage tanks and were jumping to safety before the explosion started. Behind them, enough fuel to supply a fleet for 6 months burned in the void. This scene repeated itself across the Empire. Human strike teams hit targets constantly, bleeding the slowly. Death by 1,000 cuts, the humans called it. Every destroyed supply depot meant ships that could not fly. Every sabotaged factory meant weapons that were never built. Every intercepted communication revealed new weaknesses to exploit. But the humans were not just fighting, they were learning. Every battle taught them something new about their enemy. Every captured computer revealed secrets about technology and strategy. Every prisoner provided information about the Empire's structure and weaknesses. The humans were building a complete picture of their enemy, mapping every critical system, every vulnerable point. And they were not alone. The Empire had conquered 47 species over 3,000 years. Most of these species had accepted their fate, becoming obedient subjects who served their masters without question. But they had never stopped dreaming of freedom. When news spread of the human victories, something changed. Species that had been silent for centuries began to stir. Whispers of rebellion spread from world to world. If these strange new creatures could defeat the Supreme, then perhaps freedom was possible after all. They were the first to rise up. They were a reptilian species conquered over 1,000 years ago, their once-proud civilization reduced to slave labor in mines. They attacked their overseers with stolen weapons and homemade explosives, seizing control of 3 mining stations before they could respond. The Moravians followed, their rebellion spreading across their entire home system in a matter of days. Then the silicates, the hollow ones. One by one, the conquered species began to fight back. They could not defeat the alone. Their technology was too primitive, their numbers too few. But they did not need to win. They just needed to fight to keep the Empire distracted, to stretch their forces thin across 100 different fronts. Admiral Palmer watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. The Empire was burning, consumed by fires it had started itself through centuries of cruelty and oppression. She felt no joy at the destruction. There was too much suffering on all sides for that, but she allowed herself to hope that the end might finally be in sight. The High Commander faced the truth of his situation. The war was lost. Not today, perhaps not even this year, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Empire was collapsing, eaten away from within by rebellions and from without by human attacks. We must negotiate, urged, offer the humans a treaty, give them their independence, save what remains of the Empire. Shook his head slowly. You do not understand these creatures, they will not stop, they cannot stop. We attacked there, we threatened to destroy their cities, to kill their children. They will never forgive that. They will never feel safe as long as we exist. Then what do you suggest? Was silent for a long moment. He thought about the 3,000 years of supremacy. He thought about the countless species they had conquered, the civilizations they had destroyed, the lives they had taken. For so long, he had believed this was the natural order of things. The strong conquered the weak. That was simply how the universe worked. But the humans had shown him something different. They had shown him that strength was not just about size or technology or power. It was about will, about determination, about the refusal to accept defeat no matter how impossible the odds seemed. They had never developed that kind of strength. They had never needed to. Every enemy they faced had been weaker than them, and they had grown complacent in their superiority. Now that complacency was killing them. Prepare our defenses, said finally. The humans will come for our eventually. When they do, we will make them pay for every inch of ground in blood. Perhaps we cannot win this war, but we can die like the warriors we once were. Stared at him in horror. You are talking about extinction. I am talking about facing the truth, replied. We called ourselves the Supreme. We believed it, but we were never supreme. We were simply unopposed. These humans have shown the galaxy what we truly were, complacent, arrogant, and utterly unprepared for an enemy that refuses to die. He turned to face the council chamber, looking at the faces of his fellow leaders. They were afraid. For the first time in their long lives, They understood what it felt like to be prey. "Prepare for the end," told them. "It is coming, and there is nothing we can do to stop it." Far away, on a small ship hiding in the shadow of a gas giant, Captain received a coded message from Admiral Palmer. The years of preparation were over. The humans had built a fleet large enough to strike at the heart of the Empire. They had gathered allies from dozens of species, all hungry for revenge against their former masters. The final offensive would begin in 3 months. Looked at his crew, at the tired faces of men and women who had been fighting for 7 long years. They had lost friends, family, everything they had once called home, but they had never stopped fighting. They had never stopped believing that this day would come. "Get some rest," he told them. "We have one more mission ahead of us, the biggest one of all." Lieutenant Shaw smiled grimly. "Are we going to finish this, Captain?" Nodded. "One way or another, this war ends soon. They called themselves the Supreme. It is time to show them what that word really means." The final battle began on a cold morning in the 7th year of the war. Admiral Grace Palmer stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Liberty, watching the largest fleet in human history assemble around her. Over 1,000 warships, built from human engineering and alien technology stolen from the enemy. Behind them came ships from a dozen other species, all flying together for the first time in galactic history. The Moravians, the Silicates, and more. They had all come to watch the fall of their former masters. Commander Nicholas stood beside her, looking at the massive display that showed their fleet stretching across millions of kilometers. "All ships report ready, Admiral. We are waiting for your order." Palmer took a deep breath. 7 years had led to this moment. 7 years of blood and sacrifice and death. Millions of lives lost on both sides. Entire worlds burned to ash. All of it leading here to one final confrontation. "All ships," she said, her voice carried to every vessel in the fleet, "jump to. Let us finish this." The fleet vanished into hyperspace, traveling faster than light toward the heart of the Empire. The High Commander watched them come. He had known this day would arrive. He had spent months preparing for it, building defenses, gathering what remained of his shattered military. 200 warships still answered his command, the last significant fighting force the Empire possessed. It would not be enough, he knew that, but he would make the humans bleed for their victory. That was all he had left. "All ships take defensive positions," he ordered. "Make them pay for every inch." The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. For a moment, both sides simply looked at each other across the void. 2 civilizations, one ancient and one young, facing each other for the last time. Then Admiral Palmer gave the order, "Attack." The battle lasted 3 days. It was the largest space battle in the history of the galaxy, thousands of ships fighting across millions of kilometers. The void itself seemed to burn with the fire of countless weapons. Ships died by the dozen, crews perishing in the cold dark between stars. Captain Daniel led the Shadow and a team of strike ships against the command station, where High Commander had made his final stand. They fought through defenses designed to stop entire fleets, losing ships and friends with every passing hour. But they kept pushing forward, driven by 7 years of hatred and loss and determination. The command station's outer defenses fell after 18 hours of continuous fighting. The inner sections took another 12 hours to secure. Lost 4 of his 12 crew members in the assault, including Lieutenant Shaw, who died covering their advance through a corridor filled with enemy soldiers. He found on the command deck, standing alone among the bodies of his fallen guards. The leader was wounded, silver blood dripping from a gash on his arm, but he held no weapon. He simply stood there, watching approach with calm acceptance. "You came yourself," said. It was not a question. His voice was deep and tired, the voice of someone who had already accepted his fate. Kept his rifle raised. His hands were shaking from exhaustion and rage. He had lost so many people to get here. Friends, comrades, people he had loved. All of them gone because this creature and his kind had decided that humans were beneath them. "I wanted to see the supreme ones up close," he said. "You do not look so supreme anymore." Made a sound that might have been laughter. It was a strange, sad sound. We never were. That was our greatest lie and our greatest weakness. We believed our own stories about ourselves. We thought we were invincible because no one had ever proven us wrong. He looked at with his four eyes, and there was something in his gaze that might have been respect. "You humans are remarkable creatures. In all our thousands of years of conquest, we never faced an enemy like you. Not because you are stronger or smarter than us, but because you simply refuse to accept defeat. You take our technology and make it better. You study our tactics and find ways to counter them. You lose a battle and come back stronger than before. It is as if failure only makes you more determined." Lowered his rifle slightly. He had expected to feel satisfaction at this moment. He had expected to feel triumph. Instead, he felt only tired. "We have had a lot of practice at failing," he said quietly. "Our history is full of defeats, but we always get back up. We always keep fighting. That is who we are." "Yes," agreed. "That is what makes you so dangerous. You have been fighting since your species first walked upright. War is in your blood, in your very nature. You do not conquer because you enjoy it. You conquer because you are afraid of what might happen if you do not." He turned to face the viewport, looking out at the burning ruins of his fleet. His ships were dying out there, their crews fighting to the last breath. Soon, there would be nothing left of the military. "We called ourselves the Supreme," he said. "We believed it. Every species we conquered, we told ourselves it was because we were better than them. Stronger, smarter, more worthy of ruling the galaxy." He turned back to face. His four eyes were dim now, the light fading from them. "But we were never supreme. We were simply unopposed. We won because no one was strong enough to fight back. That is not greatness. That is just luck." He straightened his wounded body, standing as tall as his 9 feet would allow. "Kill me, human. End my species' shame. We deserve nothing less." Stared at him for a long moment. His finger rested on the trigger. It would be so easy. One shot and the leader of the empire would be dead. Justice for millions of lives lost. Revenge for 7 years of war. But he shook his head. "No," he said. "You are going to live. You are going to watch as we take apart everything you built. You are going to see the species you conquered walk free. And you are going to remember for whatever years you have left that the supreme ones fell because they looked down on creatures they thought were beneath them." He gestured to his remaining team members. "Take him into custody. The war is over." Did not resist. He simply bowed his head and allowed himself to be led away. Above, the last warships surrendered. The empire that had ruled for 3,000 years had fallen in 7. Admiral Palmer watched the surrender ceremony from the Liberty's bridge. She felt no joy. There was too much death for that, too much loss on both sides. The war had cost humanity millions of lives and changed them forever as a species. Commander stood beside her, looking at the alien world below. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Palmer considered the question. "We rebuild. We help the species they conquered establish their own governments. We make sure nothing like this ever happens again." "And if it does?" Palmer smiled, though there was little warmth in it. "Then we do what humans have always done. We fight, we adapt, we survive." She looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy that now knew humanity's name. They had started this war as an unknown species on a single planet. They were ending it as the most feared military power in existence. "Let them call us primitive," she said. "Let them call us fragile and weak and short-lived. But let them also remember this day. Let them remember what happened to the last empire that thought humans would kneel." She straightened her uniform and turned to face her crew. "The Supreme are gone, and anyone else who wants to try their luck is welcome to step up. We will be ready." 100 years later, A young human diplomat stood before the Galactic Council, representing a species that had become legendary. She looked around the chamber at ambassadors from 100 different worlds, many of whom owed their freedom to human sacrifice. "We did not ask for this war," she said. "We did not want to become conquerors. But when the choice was between surrender and survival, we chose to fight. And we learned something about ourselves in that choice." She paused, letting her words echo through the silent chamber. "We learned that we are very, very good at war, perhaps too good. And that is why we have worked so hard for peace since then, because we know what we are capable of. We know the darkness that lives in our hearts, and we choose every day to build instead of destroy." She raised her glass in a toast. "To peace, to cooperation, to the hope that we never have to show the galaxy again what happens when humans go to war." The chamber raised their glasses in return. But in the back of every mind, human and alien alike, was the same thought. The Supreme had learned the hard way. Others would do well to remember their lesson. Humans were not to be underestimated, not ever.